Hey folks, a YouTube content creator who I follow from time to time that goes by Shoe on Head recently made a video addressing what's come to be known as the male loneliness epidemic. Now, Shoe on Head is female, and so that's the perspective from which she approached this topic. She addressed things like the fact that more and more men are reporting that they have almost no close friendships, that men are feeling aimless and directionless, and obviously that the male suicide rate is disturbingly high, basically all around the world. Now, after releasing that video, she let some time pass and has since released a follow up looking at the reaction to it. And while there has been quite a lot of positive response, she also catalogued a lot of the negative feedback she received. So while watching the follow up video, I watched it for about 10 minutes or so and then had to turn it off because the amount of just pure, unadulterated hatred and vitriol being spewed by the negative responders to men as a class of people was truly disturbing. Now, the negative responses mostly came from feminist types who said things like the male suicide rate should be higher than it is, and also that most men are either born useless or we are sexual deviants who feel entitled to women's bodies. All of this got me wondering what the fuck has happened to us as the human race? Why are men and women enemies? Why do we have to be at one another's throats all the time? This is one of the things that makes me the most sad about modern life because, frankly, I don't want to be at odds with anyone based on some arbitrary characteristic like gender. But it seems that gender politics are only becoming more and more extreme on both sides because the amount of just open and vicious cruelty that I see from feminists who basically say not only that male loneliness isn't a problem, but that it should almost be celebrated and encouraged is truly sickening. And it's no wonder with this kind of rhetoric floating around that the backlash is men becoming red pilled in the very worst sense of the term and treating women as disposable objects that should be used for sex and then discarded. Neither of these attitudes towards life are helpful or healthy for that matter, and if they continue, we'll end up destroying ourselves as a race. Because, newsflash, whether the feminists or the alpha male crowd want to believe it, we both need one another. The human race is a complementary species. One cannot survive without the other, nor should we, because we are at our best when we work together. Speaking as a physically disabled man, I can tell you that one of the biggest drivers of suicidal ideation for me is my disability. And the reason for that is my disability makes me feel useless and like I can't properly embody the role that a man should be able to for him to have true value in this world. Because it's funny to hear feminists claim that, oh, the world was built for men and that men are just entitled little babies who think they deserve the attention of a woman simply for existing. That has not been my experience at all. If anything, I most often feel that because I'm unable to physically embody the traditionally masculine roles that men are expected to fulfill, I feel like I take up resources that would be better used elsewhere, and that the world in general would be better off if I just got out the way. And that is how many men feel, even if they aren't physically disabled like I am. I don't like the way that men are commonly portrayed in media and news, as though we are unfeeling brutes who don't care about anything except satisfying our own selfish desires. Yes, obviously there are men like that. I live in South Africa, which is a country with one of the highest and most disturbing rates of rape and sexual assault in the entire world. So obviously there are men who see women as nothing more than objects to fulfill their sexual wants and desires. But we don't all think like that, and most normal men would be disgusted at the very thought of behaving in such a way. But as I said earlier, all modern gender politics seems to do is to split us up into these rigid camps where you're either feminist, which means you believe that men should always be taking a backseat to the interests and desires of women, or you're some kind of Chad alpha male who only treats women as secondary, superfluous, and maybe useful in one or two situations. What I really want to see is what we did used to have at one time, where people were able to acknowledge that men and women each have unique strengths and abilities which complement one another, and that it's okay that we are different, and that our differences are what make us work as a species. Because there are things women can do that men simply can't, and the same goes in the opposite direction. It's important, to me anyway, that we view one another as total human beings and not this kind of disturbing and warped caricature that we are being fed. Because this cycle of back and forth nitpicking and bomb throwing only ends one way, in total and utter social collapse. Because if this continues and men and women continue to divide into these rigid camps, there's going to eventually be a point where we no longer have any common ground, and that will be the end of us, well and truly. So basically, the whole point of my little ramble here is that men and women do not need to be enemies, and we should not be enemies. Look after yourselves, try to be kind to those around you, and for now, farewell.